0345 6060 973 is the number to call as we are debating the causes of the rise in IS as well as the media's response. Richard is in Stepney. Morning, Richard.
Morning, Cristo. It's brilliant to speak to you. Thanks for having me on. Just like to say as well, you're by far the best LBC presenter.
Oh, well, what wonderful taste you have, Richard.
And I mean that wholeheartedly, because you just, you listen so well, and you're very good at hearing things that you don't want to hear. And that's quite rare for a radio presenter, if you don't mind me saying.
Well, thank you, Richard. I'm not an authority on everything. So I like to think I am, but I'm not, and I have to be prepared. You know what? I couldn't, honestly, Richard. I used to do a show where I was the authority on everything when I did showbiz, and I knew everything about everything, and I used to find it quite boring that I knew everything. Yeah. Whereas what I love about this programme is I learn something because I don't know about a lot of the things I talk about. So
you exhibit a lot of character, and you've got tolerance for people's opinions, even when you don't agree with them.
Bless you, Richard. So let's now give me an opinion that I might not agree with. Then go on. Let's put this into practice, Richard. Well, what have you got?
Won't, unfortunately, but I mean, it has to be said now. Yeah, we've got to stop blaming the media and all pointing fingers at the media, Christo, because it's the media don't call Islamic State Islamic State. Islamic State have called themselves Islamic State. And no matter what we say, no matter how much we dance around the issue, the elephant in the room is Islam, right? The reason why we're concerned about the media, our reaction, how the media are portraying the information is because Muslims are going to start throwing tantrums. Now,
I don't believe that's true. I'm sorry, I don't believe... Right, let me just respond to that before you tell me why you think I'm not right.
Okay.
Firstly, I have never once, and you can believe me or not, never once had an email to say, you need to be careful about the way you report this in case we offend people of the Islamic faith. Never in my life have I received that email from any editor that has been here at LBC, and I know that for the fact that we can discuss that kind of thing. What I find personally difficult about what you've just said, Richard, is that yes, if you were to take parts of the Quran in the absolute most extreme form and the actions of Muhammad, yes, there are stories in there of slaughter and of trying to get people to convert to the Islamic faith, as there are in the Bible stories of certain wars where certain ethnicities or religions are wiped out, just like there are other religions where, if you take it literally, of course they are violent, horrific, awful books, but anyone with a modicum of sense says, okay, that's how it was written, but we interpret it in a different way in a civilised society.
Cristo, I really hope you let me reply to that, because I've got a very good answer for you, and what that is, that's a platitude. And it's a rosy platitude that radio presenters and people in the media seem to be trained. It's almost like you've been given a script.
No, well, we haven't, but go on.
Okay, but let me finish this point. What you're doing is you're comparing apples to oranges, because when you're talking about other religions, you're talking about Islam, you talk about the Bible. Number one, you've got to understand that 99.9% of the religious violence comes from Islam anyway.
You can't... No, Richard, sorry, I am going to jump in again. Can I have the source, please, of your 99.9% comment there?
Okay, look.
Because you are... Sorry, Richard, you are saying that the media is...
You haven't let me...
No, but I'm going to let you finish this point, but you can't say that you believe that the media is in some way restricting itself in its reporting of Islam, and then in the same breath give a ridiculous statistic that's not based on anything. Go on.
It's actually based on a reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is this. The only way you can compare atrocities and other acts of civil unrest is when you're looking at sort of like other kind of movements that are motivated by other things. Islam is the only religion that produces daily killing sprees on a regular basis. And when you compare it to the Bible, what you're forgetting is that in the Quran, Muhammad's word is eternal. Muhammad is to be considered strictly as the perfect example of human conduct, and that is the main difference. Furthermore, as I was telling your other radio presenter when I spoke to him a few weeks ago, is that in the Quran, the violent passages supersede the earlier ones. So the earlier passages that speak of moderation and seem quite reasonable and peaceful are later abrogated by the violent ones, which command Muslims to wage violent warfare. Now, this is the main point I wanted to make. we're all suffering with the spectacular ignorance that everyone in your show is actually exhibiting now. It's not none of your fault. It's because what you do is you just assume, oh, this is just another religion. It's Christianity with a towel on its head. But when you're pushing that narrative, when you're peddling that narrative, okay, you're relying heavily on the ignorance of a gullible Western audience. Basically, it's how close are you willing to look? So you want to say to yourself, okay, well, this is just a group of extremists that don't represent Islam. How do you know that? At least what America do, America allow people onto their news channel, on their media, like Robert Spencer, Bridget Gabriel, Richard Abraham, people who are Islamic scholars who know and can demonstrate clearly, emphatically, that Islam is the main source of, is what inspires the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. And what you have to understand about jihad is the most applauded and the most revered Islamic practice. And jihad is the only Islamic practice which guarantees Muslims straight entrance to the most elite quarters of paradise. Now, when all these Muslims around the country, we say to ourselves, why are they joining ISIS? We don't understand it. It is spectacularly ignorant. The reason why they join in ISIS is because that's what their religion tells them to do. Muhammad, there's nothing, absolutely nothing that ISIS do that Muhammad never did. And in complete contrast, when you compare Muhammad to Jesus, that's your main difference. If you've got a 7th century warrior who went around beheading people, right, and you've got that kind of influence running mainstream through the religion, and also you have to understand as well that the vast majority of mosques in this country are financed by the Wahhabis, who believe in the simplified, purified version of Islam, which takes it back to its roots. There is absolutely a completely legitimate argument for ISIS. They have very strong theological grounds. So what we have to do is we have to come to terms with the fact that the problem is within the Quranic text itself, and we have to introduce programs to counteract it. And stop pretending this has got nothing to do with Islam, because to say it's got nothing to do with Islam is like saying Mickey Mouse has got nothing to do with Walt Disney.
Okay, I absolutely accept what you are saying, but why then is every single person who follows the Islamic faith not violent?
Okay, because...
So are you saying that they're bad Muslims?
No, what I'm trying to tell you is, when you get a Muslim that's not violent, which is most of them, right? It's like when you get a Christian that's not violent, or a Hindu, or a West Ham supporter that's not violent. The reason why people are not violent is because we're human beings. And human beings, 9 times out of 10, as I said to your colleague before, human beings 9 times out of 10 are far more likely to be loyal to the laws that are written in the human heart than they are to the bloodthirsty...
So you're saying that they're bad Muslims then? They're not being true to the Islamic faith by not being violent. They are choosing humanity over martyrdom.
They are choosing humanity, that's correct. The only time Islam sanctions peace with non-believers is once Islam has become the dominant force. Muslims have an absolute religious duty to resist non-Islamic governments. Islam is not to be ruled by any other religion. This is what makes Islam so different. You have to understand this. You can't say this is like any other religion, and I'm afraid that you're wrong. The vast majority, in today's world, in recent times, the past decade at least 95% of religiously motivated violence is committed in the name of Islam. And when you want to go back and you bring up Christian atrocities and things like that, the vast majority of them, like the Crusades, for example, and by the way, I'm no Christian, I'm a complete atheist. Christianity is obviously the second worst religion. Islam is just a million times worse. But we've got to come to terms with this. We can't go around with our head stuck in the sand. Pick up the Quran and read it.
Okay, well then what about... Okay, Richard, Judges 12, 5 to 6. Are you an Ephraimite? When he said no, they said to him, then say Shibboeth. And he said Shibboeth, for he could not pronounce it right. Then they seized him, killed him at the fords of Jordan. 42,000 of the Ephraimites fell at that time. That's Judges 12, 5 and 6. Joshua 8:24 to 26. When the Israelite army finished chasing and killing all the men of Ai in the open fields, they went back and finished off everyone inside. The entire population of Ai, including men and women, was wiped out that day, 12,000 in all. For Joshua kept holding out his spear until everyone who had lived in Ai was completely destroyed. Bible. Again, I have a list here of Bible quotes which are absolutely, completely and utterly abhorrently violent. Now, every religious text, Richard, has quotes parts of it that are horrifically violent. I mean, are you saying that Christians are bad if they don't go and slaughter other religions as well? Why are you only saying that it is members of the Islamic faith that need to be violent to be good Muslims, when there are very, very violent... Now, let me finish the question. There are many violent passages within the Bible that you could very easily ring and argue to say, well, actually, these people are bad Christians because they're not going out and being violent and killing other religions.
See, when you talk about Christianity, that doesn't make Islam any better.
No, it makes no. What it means, what it demonstrates, is that every single religion has a violent text associated with it. But in modern day humanity, as you pointed out, people who have a modicum of sense about them, a modicum of decency, and actually what I consider actually a modicum of intelligence, they say, you know what? That is a metaphor. That doesn't really mean that for me to be a good Christian, I need to go and kill all the other religions, because nowadays that's not the case. And sorry, there are lots and lots of Muslims who think that way. Now, if there are some that decide to take the Quran in the most rawest form and that they still need to carry out the word of Muhammad in the most violent way, they are the ones that are interpreting things not for 2015. They're not the ones that are being the better Muslims. They're being the ones that are the misguided ones.
See, the problem is you're not supported by Islamic scripture, and this.
Well, you're not supported by biblical scripture.
Listen, but the thing is, you're asking the wrong person to defend Christianity, because I'm not a fan of Christianity. I think it's a terrible.
I'm not a fan of any of them.
But what I'm trying to tell you is that you're comparing apples to oranges, and if I was to say to you, can you balance out the amount of terrorist atrocities that are committed by Christians as with Muslims? You haven't got a theological leg to stand on. What you've got to understand is, with those parts of the Bible that you're eloquently expressing on right here, right now, is the fact that they are in fact surrounded by historical context. Now, there's nothing in the Bible that encourages Christians to go out in today's world and wage violent warfare against non-believers. The Old Testament has been replaced with the New Testament, the peaceful message of Christ. So the Bible also starts off quite violently, then declines into a more peaceful message. The Quran goes in the opposite direction. Now, this is why the violence is never going to end with Islam, because it's the word of Muhammad, it's eternal, and it's to be taken as the literal word of Allah. So this is where there's no historical context surrounding it. When you read the Quran, when you read the Quran, these violent passages are open-ended passages to war. Slay the unbeliever wherever you find them. When you meet the unbelievers in battle, strike off their heads. Muhammad taught his followers to meet the unbelievers in battle and offer them the option to submit to Islam.
Richard, I accept that, but then Matthew, right? Give me a passage of Matthew. Should we give it 7:13-14, where Jesus says that most people will go to hell? This is the non-violent New Testament you were just talking of.
Talking about Christianity.
Because I'm trying to point out, as you've just said to me, that the Old Testament was replaced by the New Testament, which wasn't violent, and therefore because the
Well, it's not violent. I would say it's a lot more tolerant. I mean, it's still.
I wouldn't say those who fail to bear good fruit will be hewn down and cast into the fire. What is it going to take for people to understand that there are fundamental problems with Islam and many of its followers? The kind of violence that spreads through the Islamic world, we've allowed an historical violent ideology that has killed over 1 billion people throughout the. Oh, sorry, are you talking about Christianity there?
No, I'm not.
Oh, sorry, because I get confused, because I would say Christianity's been a pretty violent...
If you want to compare the death toll between Islam and Christianity, believe me, you haven't got a theological leg to stand on.
Oh, so you know those figures presumably yourself then, Richard?
Well, I'm an Islamic scholar. I mean, I read about the things, because after I lost a friend in 9/11, and after 9/11 we had the same things also.
Sorry, no, that wasn't my question. I'm sorry you lost a friend in 9/11, but have you actually studied the comparison between the numbers of people killed as a result of Christianity over the centuries as a result of violent crimes in the name of Christianity compared to the number of people, let me ask the question, over the centuries that have died as a result of violent crimes that have been perpetuated by those people following the Islamic faith? Have you compared both those numbers in history?
Yes, I have compared.
Okay, I'd love to hear them.
Okay, now what what you actually got.
No, that answer would be a number, Richard.
Okay, well, okay. It's not. Unfortunately, the answer you're looking for is not as simple as you want it to be. And it seems to me like most radio presenters, when Islam's under attack, you're far more interested in the question than you are of the answer. Now, I can give you a good answer if you want to listen to it. Now, the fact of the matter is, people automatically jump to the Crusades, for example. That's what Muslim apologists generally love to point to. Well, look at the Crusades. Number one, you have to look at this historical fact. The Crusades were not motivated by the teachings of Christ. Probably around at least 80% of the violence that was supposedly committed by Christians was not done in the name of Christ. It was done in the age where the human race was very undeveloped, very uncivilized, and these people happened to be Christians, but they did not do it in the name of Christ. That Christianity is evolved into our way of looking at the world. We know the world is round and not flat. We don't burn witches at the stake anymore. Tolerance and democracy in our way of life is far more important to the average Christian than religious dogma. But to think that Islam is transformed in the same way, you have got to be absolutely spectacularly ignorant or just plain stupid. Now, the Crusades were a response unit to centuries of Islamic aggression that had already conquered two-thirds of the Christian world. Islam has been at war with the West for over 1,400 years, and it's a war that's still going on today. And it's never going to stop until we understand this is what Muhammad taught, and this is the prescripts of Islam, and the Muslims consider Muhammad to be the absolute ideal, most supreme human being and ideal role model. This is why ISIS are growing, because Muhammad is an influence, a very strong influence. And we've got to stop telling ourselves, oh, these people logging onto the internet, why are they doing this? Why are they going over there? Because Muhammad tells them to do it. That's why it's fully supported by the Quran, and there's nothing that ISIS do that Muhammad never did. This religion is...
But the point I am making is that you may be saying something that is absolutely true regarding the teachings of the Quran, right? That is absolutely right. And some people might take that and decide to go with it in a way that is murdering people, being a terrorist, being violent.
Yeah.
The point I am making is, firstly, you've not been able to come up with an answer to whether the comparison between number of people killed as a result of Islam versus number of people killed versus Christianity.
Christianity. That's all
because the very, very same argument. Because the very, very same. I'm not trying to appease Muslims. What I'm trying to do is to say that the very, very same books that religions come from, whether that be Christianity, whether it be Judaism, whether it from the Old Testament, whether it be the Quran, whatever, have grisly, violent, awful rhetoric within those books that, if taken as read and taken literally, would mean that people could be violent. Now, I do not know why, at the moment, there is more of a propensity for those certain people who claim to follow the Islamic faith to want to follow it word for word.
Cristo, it's wise to listen to your enemy, okay? It's very wise to listen to your enemy. Will you please start listening to the enemy?
When someone comes up with an argument that I can't completely counter in exactly the same way from the Bible, then maybe I would. But the Bible, in my eyes, is as violent as the Quran.
Keep doing this, Cristo.
Because
you're defending Islam, because you're probably scared you might get shot.
That is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I've said the most. The
radio station is terrified of Islam.
I have torn apart people who have been bigoted and rude regarding all sorts of...
LBC is terrified of Islam and the knee-jerk offence of Muslims. You don't want to talk the truth because you're frightened of it. It's the same problem with our politicians. It's the same problem. People get fired in the workplace because of it. This religion is attacking our freedom. We've allowed an historical violent ideology. None of us are safe, and all you want to do is dance around the issue.
No, I'm sorry, but if you're going to talk about a historically violent ideology, Richard, then I'm afraid you're going to have to include every religion. That is all I am saying, because it is the truth. Richard, thank you, but I'll give you another quote from the New Testament that replaced the old one. Jesus advises his followers to mutilate themselves by cutting off their hands and plucking out their eyes. He says it's better to be maimed than to suffer everlasting fire. Does that mean that in order for me to be a true Christian, I need to cut off my own hands and pluck out my own eyes? Of course not. And if I were to do that, no one would say, well done, you're following Christianity, this violent rhetoric. People would say, you're insane. You're taking these words and you are using them in a way that is unchristian. Now, why would we say that about the Bible, but we won't say it about the Quran? And that's, I think, the issue. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call here on LBC.
This is LBC Cristo on LBC.
Good morning, it is Cristo here on LBC. Well, Mohammed heard the last call from Richard and isn't particularly happy about that. Morning, Mohammed.